I never believed in the power of a single moment to shatter a life, not until the night I found them. That evening felt ordinary in every sense. The low hum of the street lamp outside, the muted chirping of crickets beyond the window, and the faint aroma of microwaved leftovers clinging to the kitchen air. I'd just come home from another long day at the office, tie loosened around my collar, my head buzzing with spreadsheets and bottom lines. All I wanted was a quiet evening with my wife, maybe a glass of Cabernet to smooth out the tension in my skull. I opened the front door, expecting Elizabeth in the living room, perhaps curled up with a fashion magazine or flipping through the channels. Instead, I found silence. Her purse lay on the entryway table, foam partially sticking out. Willow, our gray tabby, meowed and brushed against my leg. Nothing unusual, so I set down my keys, shrugged off my jacket, and headed down the hallway. A soft groan reached my ears. At first, I froze, uncertain of the sound. My heart thumped. I took slow, measured steps toward the slightly ajar bedroom door. A mixture of dread and confusion threaded through my veins. The air felt charged, static dancing along the corridor. My breath tightened. Then I heard it again, a hushed moan that resonated with something both primal and terrifying in me. Elizabeth's voice, no mistake. But it wasn't alone. I nudged the door open, a swirl of adrenaline threatening to rip the hinges clean off. The soft bedside lamp illuminated tangled sheets, Elizabeth arching beneath a man's dark silhouette, his broad back flexing as he pressed against her. My mind short-circuited. I thought, this isn't real. Must be some twisted dream. But my eyes refused to lie, capturing every humiliating detail, her fingertips digging into his arms, his face buried against her neck, the rumpled clothes tossed carelessly on the floor. The bed I'd shared with her for years was no longer ours. I stood there, throat constricting, too stunned to form a single word. They were so consumed by each other, they didn't hear me at first. Blood pounded in my ears, matching the frantic thud inside my chest. I wanted to roar, to fling the nightstand across the room, or to vanish, anything but remain frozen in that doorway. My skin turned hot, a dizzying wave of nausea rolling up from my stomach. Elizabeth's eyes fluttered open mid-gasp. The moment she saw me, her whole body jerked away from him. The man, Daniel, I'd later learn, scrambled back, nearly tumbling off the bed in a panic. He whipped his head around, eyes wide, muscular arms tensing like he expected a fist to land across his jaw. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. My vision blurred, tears and fury wrestling for dominance. My wife, the woman I'd kissed every morning, the partner I'd vowed to cherish, lay beneath a stranger. My chest seized. I forced air through my nostrils. Richard, she breathed, voice shaky, face glowing with sweat and guilt. The sheet slipped around her shoulders. She scrambled to cover herself, but the damage was done. Her cheeks flushed with a mixture of shock and shame. Daniel muttered, "Look, man." But I cut him off with a strangled growl. I lunged forward without thinking, fists clenched. My entire being thrummed with feral rage. He scrambled, nearly tripping over his pants. Elizabeth shrieked, "Stop," as I aimed a blow at his chest, but I only grazed him. My punch slid off his left arm, leaving a stinging ache in my knuckles. He stumbled backward, breath ragged, arms raised defensively. Willow hissed from the hallway, a small creature echoing my own fury. I felt a swirl of madness take hold. My mind hammered. She betrayed me. She gave our bed, our life, to another man. I wanted to break him, break something, break everything. Instead, I stood there, fists trembling, panting like I'd run a marathon. The copper tang of blood hovered near my tongue, probably from biting my cheek in rage. Elizabeth clutched the sheet around herself, eyes locked on me with raw horror. "Richard, She seemed unable to finish. Daniel's voice rasped in the background. "I didn't know you'd be home so soon." It was a useless statement, as though that alone explained his presence. He fumbled for his shirt, sliding it over his head, his posture defensive. My gaze flicked to Elizabeth, then back to him. The thunderous swirl of questions rattled inside my skull, but words refused to form. Silence inflated the room, thick and suffocating. I stared at them, memorizing the scene, his panicked expression, her disheveled hair, the sweat glistening on her brow, the discarded underwear near the foot of the bed. This was my wife, and yet I felt like an intruder in my own home. Shock battered me. The simplest truth roared louder than any rational thought. She cheated. She chose him over me. At last, I found my voice, though it emerged ragged and hoarse. Elizabeth. My chest heaved as if I'd just sprinted miles. I can't believe you did this. She held my gaze, her blue eyes wet. I'm sorry. A tremor rippled through her tone. Sorry. The word ripped out of me, bitter as bile. My nails dug into my palms. That's all you've got. Daniel stepped closer, as if to protect her. Or maybe he just wanted to appear apologetic. Look, man, let's calm down, all right. His attempt at reason only fueled my fury. Something primal coiled inside me, a black serpent of betrayal hissing in every cell of my body. Get out. I spat the word so forcefully my throat stung. Get your clothes. Get out of my house. Now. He hesitated, then hurriedly collected his pants, underwear, and socks. Elizabeth squirmed on the bed, clutching the sheet. As Daniel brushed past me, the stench of sweat and cologne stung my nostrils. I itched to grab him by the neck. But something, maybe fear of losing all control, held me back. For a moment, the only sound was his retreat down the hallway. The front door clicked open, then slammed shut. I stared at Elizabeth. She lowered her head, tears gliding down her cheeks. My heart hammered as though trying to drive itself right out of my chest. I wanted to scream, to smash every piece of furniture in the room. Instead, I forced myself to inhale. So, this is it. My voice shook. You think we can sweep this under the rug? Act like it didn't happen. Who is he? Liz? Who the hell is that guy? She swallowed hard, shoulders trembling. His name is Daniel. Daniel Brooks. We met a few months ago through work. A harsh laugh escaped me. Work, right. Of course. My mind flipped back over the last few months. The nights she'd come home late, the sudden phone calls she'd dismiss in hushed tones, the fleeting distance in her gaze. Hindsight arrived like a punch in the gut. You've been sneaking around. Sleeping with him. Why? She clutched the sheet tighter. Richard, it wasn't supposed to go this far. I felt lost, I guess. I needed something I wasn't getting here. I let that sink in, fighting the savage urge to lash out. You think I don't feel lost sometimes? My voice ricocheted off the walls. But I didn't tear us apart. She closed her eyes, tears falling faster. My anger flared, fueled by her silent weeping. She had no right to cry, not after what she did. Yet part of me longed to hold her, to find some reason behind this madness. That war inside me churned, twisting my thoughts into knots. Love and betrayal clashed head-on, creating a scorching friction in my chest. Elizabeth whispered, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. Then why do it? I demanded, stepping closer. She flinched, as though expecting me to strike her. The realization that she might fear me left a bitter aftertaste. I wasn't a monster. But her betrayal made me feel monstrous, a raw nerve throbbing with rage. I don't know, she mumbled, voice cracking. It felt exciting at first. Then, I was in too deep. I never planned for you to find out. A humorless chuckle burst from my lips. Oh, so that's the plan. Cheat behind my back until you're done playing around. She looked away, glancing at the photograph on the nightstand. Our wedding picture, taken a decade ago on that sunny June afternoon. We'd been so happy, or so I thought. The memory of that day cut deeper than any knife. I marched across the room, yanking the picture off the table. My reflection glared at me in the glass, next to Elizabeth's glowing smile from years ago. I wanted to smash it. Instead, I set it down with trembling care, unable to destroy the last relic of a love I once believed was unbreakable. Elizabeth spoke again, barely above a whisper. "Please, Richard, can we talk about this? Let me explain." I whirled, my voice spiking. "Explain what, exactly?" "That you let another man touch you in our bed." The words spilled out, sharp as shattered glass. "That you lied, day after day." She sobbed, face in her hands. My chest felt too tight, like my lungs refused to expand properly. The flicker of pity that tried to arise got doused by blistering anger. I spun on my heel, stumbling out into the hallway. Willow darted away. Everything blurred. Walls, pictures, furniture. I ended up in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter as though it might anchor me to reality. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Rage, betrayal, heartbreak. They all jostled for space inside my skull. I forced deep, ragged inhalations. My entire life had just detonated, leaving me in a cloud of dust and regret. Elizabeth's footsteps echoed behind me, hesitant. "Richard," she pleaded. "I know this is horrible. But please, let's not make any final decisions tonight." Still what?" I shouted, turning on her. "Still love me." "That's a joke." I raked a hand through my hair. "Liz, you broke us. Do you understand that?" Hot tears burned the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall in front of her. She paused, fiddling with the ring on her finger. "I do, and I hate myself for it. But if there's even a chance for what? Forgiveness. Redemption. You think I can just wash this away?" My voice trembled, half with fury, half with heartbreak. "God, I can't even look at you right now." She pressed her lips together, tears shining on her cheeks. My heart twisted in on itself. I loved her for so many years, treasured her laughter, her warmth. Now all I could see was the image of her body entwined with his, the small gasps of pleasure she made, the undeniable proof that our bond had fractured. Silence hung between us like a heavy drape. Finally, she exhaled shakily, stepping toward me. I backed away, raising a hand to stop her. "Don't." Her shoulders sagged. I'll give you space. We can talk tomorrow, or whenever you're ready." I forced a bitter smile. "Sure, tomorrow." My voice was flat, distant. "Do me a favor, though. Don't sleep in our room tonight." Her face fell, but she nodded. With one last tearful glance, she turned and walked back down the hallway. I heard her gather her things and retreat to the guest bedroom we rarely used, the one with the squeaky mattress and dusty lamp. A hollow ache spread through my chest, mingling with violent fury. I wanted to punch a hole in the wall, to rip every memory off the shelves. Instead, I just stood there, a statue of heartbreak in the silent kitchen. Minutes or hours later, I couldn't tell, I realized my phone was vibrating in my pocket. I numbly pulled it out. A text from a coworker asking about tomorrow's presentation. The mundane normalcy of it made me want to fling the device across the room. Instead, I slid it back into my pocket. My gaze fell on the half bottle of Cabernet Elizabeth, and I had shared a few nights ago. I snatched it from the counter, grabbed a glass, and poured until the ruby liquid nearly overflowed. Standing under the fluorescent kitchen light, I swallowed mouthfuls of cheap comfort, ignoring the tears that finally slipped down my cheeks. This was the end of something sacred, the beginning of something dark and unknown. My entire world had collapsed in a matter of minutes, and I had no clue how to rebuild. The wine tasted bitter, or maybe that was my own anguish. My reflection in the window looked haggard, older by decades. Guilt, fury, heartbreak. They all clung to me, refusing to let go. I set the glass aside, letting the rest of the wine swirl, untouched. A single question drummed in my head. What now? I had no answer. Sunlight filtered through the blinds the next morning, slicing across my unshaven face. I'd collapsed on the living room couch sometime around 4 a.m. Sleep had been restless. Visions of Elizabeth and that stranger, Daniel, tangling in my subconscious. My temples ached as though a vice clamped my skull. This was no nightmare that vanished with dawn. It was the new reality. I sat up, the sofa cushions squeaking in protest. The house was silent. Perhaps Elizabeth was still in the guest room, or maybe she'd left early. I wasn't sure which possibility I preferred. My chest burned with a swirl of conflicting desires, an urge to confront her, an urge to flee. I compromised by standing and trudging into the bathroom, splashing cold water on my face. The reflection that stared back looked haunted. My hazel eyes were ringed with sleepless shadows, my hair disheveled. That short, silvered streak at my temples seemed more prominent than ever, like the betrayal had accelerated my aging overnight. I made coffee, ignoring the quiet hush. The pot gurgled, a lonely sound in our once warm kitchen. Elizabeth's cat, Willow, circled my ankles, meowing for breakfast. Mechanically, I filled her bowl. My hand shook with leftover rage. That's when I heard the gentle pad of footsteps behind me. Elizabeth emerged, eyes puffy, hair neatly combed, but lacking its usual shine. She wore a casual blouse and jeans, as though trying to appear normal. No ring on her finger. That detail sliced a fresh wound in my chest. "Morning," she said quietly, her voice raw. I didn't respond, pouring coffee into a mug. The aroma turned my stomach. She stepped closer, arms folded. "Richard, I know you need space, but we have to talk." I stiffened. My mind replayed the previous night in grotesque loops. About what? The details. How long you've been sneaking around? She flinched. 3 months, she confessed, swallowing hard. It started innocently. Coffee meetups, brainstorming sessions after work. I didn't realize how quickly a line could be crossed. A sour laugh erupted from me. "Yeah, that line you crossed last night was anything but subtle." I turned to face her, mug clenched tight in my hand. "Why him? Liz? Why do this at all?" She looked down, tears threatening again. I felt like we were drifting. You were always buried in numbers, deadlines, phone calls. I wanted to feel alive, desired. Daniel listened, complimented my ideas. We connected. My throat tightened. "So you threw everything away for some cheap thrill." "It wasn't cheap," she shot back, a surprising edge in her voice. Then, as though regretting her tone, she quickly softened. "I'm not excusing what I did. I betrayed you. That's on me. But please understand, I felt alone in this marriage for a while." Anger flared. "You felt alone." My voice trembled. "I've been working my tail off to give us a stable future. How is that ignoring you?" She rubbed her temples, frustration etched in every line of her face. "It's not about money or stability. It's about connecting emotionally, feeling seen and heard." A pause. Then quieter. "You stopped seeing me." My chest constricted. Memories flickered. The nights I came home late, the times I cut short her stories because I was preoccupied with the next morning's meeting. Guilt warred with my fury. "That's a flimsy excuse for sleeping with another man." She sighed, voice trembling. "I know. I messed up. I'm just explaining how it happened. I never wanted to hurt you, but I did." A savage wave of indignation swept me. "Hurt me?" I set my mug down, liquid sloshing onto the countertop. "Liz, you tore my heart out. You think I can just get over that?" She stepped back, tears hovering at the edge of her lashes. "No, I don't. I don't expect you to forgive me today or tomorrow. But I do love you, Richard. Maybe that doesn't matter now, but it's the truth." For a heartbeat, I stared at her, chest pounding. The love we'd built over a decade clashed with the monstrous betrayal she'd unleashed. I felt torn, pinned between a desire to scream and an urge to hold her, like hugging someone who just stabbed me. Finally, I swallowed. "What do you want from me?" Her shoulders slumped, as though the weight of the question pressed down. I want a chance to fix this, but I'll respect whatever you decide. I nearly laughed at the irony. She wants me to decide, after she's the one who obliterated our trust. The bitterness coated my tongue. I need time, I muttered, and I need answers from him. Her eyes widened. Daniel, you want to talk to him? Yeah. If he's half a man, he'll meet me face to face. My jaw tightened. A confrontation felt inevitable. Some primal drive to challenge the man who had invaded my marriage. Elizabeth frowned, a flicker of worry crossing her face. Richard, be careful. I don't want violence. I snorted. Too late for caution. Liz. The damage is done. She pressed her lips together. If you're going to see him, please don't do anything rash. I'm not making promises. My voice came out in a growl, surprising even myself. I grabbed my keys and stormed out. The morning air slapped my face, bracing and real. The sky shone an unforgiving blue overhead, a stark contrast to the chaos chewing at my insides. I climbed into my car, turned the ignition, and let the engine's rumble fill the silence. I didn't drive off immediately. My hands gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled force. What now? The voice in my head repeated. Images of the previous night flooded back. Elizabeth's trembling lips, Daniel's muscular frame overshadowing my wife, the raw betrayal searing my memory. I closed my eyes, breath ragged, jaw clenched tight. Then I exhaled and pulled out of the driveway, no real destination in mind. The day passed in a blur of aimless driving and staccato phone calls. I half-heartedly canceled a work meeting, muttering some excuse about a personal emergency. My colleague sounded concerned, but I ended the conversation before he could pry. Guilt nipped at me. My professional life had always been my refuge. Now I couldn't focus on numbers and projections. Heartbreak overshadowed everything. Late that afternoon, I found myself parked outside a sleek office building downtown. A sign reading Viridian Creative glinted in the sunshine. Through a quick search on my phone, I tracked Daniel's workplace. Part of me felt insane, but I was tired of feeling powerless. I entered the lobby, the air scented with fresh paint and new carpets. A young receptionist with stylish glasses greeted me. Good afternoon. May I help you? I'm here to see Daniel Brooks, I said, voice flat. Do you have an appointment? She asked politely. I shook my head. Just tell him Richard Walsh is here. She tapped a message into her computer, glancing at me with mild curiosity. After a moment, she got a response. He'll meet you in the lounge area, down the hall, second door to the left. I nodded stiffly. My heart pounded with each step across the polished floor. The lounge was minimalist. White walls, modern furniture, abstract artwork. And there he was, perched on a low couch, wearing fitted trousers and a patterned shirt, an air of casual confidence about him. His expression tightened when he saw me. He stood slowly. Richard, wasn't sure you'd actually come. I scanned his face. Angular jaw, neatly trimmed goatee, eyes dark with caution. My fists clenched at my sides, old anger simmering beneath the surface. We need to talk. He gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing. He sighed. Okay, let's talk. I inhaled, struggling to keep my composure. You sleeping with my wife. You realize how that tears a man apart. He lowered his gaze. I know it's messed up. I never intended. Spare me, I hissed. You knew she was married. His lips pressed into a thin line. Yeah, I did. We got close. She said her marriage was on the rocks. One thing led to another. He shrugged, eyes flicking away. It just happened. My anger flared. Nothing just happens. You made a choice. He nodded, jaw tight. You're right. I did. And I regret the pain it caused you. I took a step closer, adrenaline spiking. You regret it now that I'm here. But did you regret it when you were in my bed? He didn't flinch. I'm not proud. I'm sorry. A sudden urge to knock him flat lanced through me. But the cold, rational side of my brain held me back. I stared at him, at the tension in his shoulders, the subdued guilt in his eyes. This was the man who'd invaded my life, yet the emptiness in his stare hinted he never expected to face me like this. I swallowed. If you have any shred of decency, leave her alone. Permanently. His brow furrowed. Elizabeth's an adult. I can't decide for her. Wrong answer. My voice cracked with barely controlled rage. Stay away from her, or I swear you'll regret it. He exhaled, shoulders slumping. Fine. If that's what she wants, I won't contact her again. We stood in silence a moment, the air thick with unspoken threats. At last I turned to go, but paused at the door. You destroyed my world, I said quietly, and I won't let you off so easily. Then I left, the echo of my footsteps trailing me through the pristine corridors. Outside, I gulped fresh air, my pulse still frantic. I felt no relief, only the raw knowledge that something inside me had changed, darkened. My anger toward Daniel remained, but an even fiercer tide of betrayal roiled, aimed at Elizabeth and at myself, for failing to see the cracks that led us here. As the sun dipped low, I drove home. I had no plan, just a swirling maelstrom of rage, sorrow, and confusion. But one thing was certain, I couldn't keep living under the same roof as Elizabeth, not without consequences. The following days blurred into a storm of emotional whiplash. Elizabeth tried to approach me with guilt-laden kindness, making dinner, tidying the house, even leaving heartfelt notes by my coffee mug. I tore them up unread, burying myself in work. Nights, I lay awake on the couch, mind spiraling with images of her and Daniel. That obsessive loop stoked a growing bitterness, and I found myself nurturing it like a twisted lifeline. One evening, I arrived home from the office later than usual. The house was dark, but a faint glow came from beneath my bedroom door. I braced myself and pushed it open. Elizabeth sat on the bed, a single lamp illuminating her tear-stained face. Photos were spread across the comforter, pictures of us on vacations, at family gatherings, at random Sunday brunches. She looked up, startled by my entrance. "Richard," she whispered. I wanted to remember the good times. Her voice cracked, and she gestured to a photo of us laughing on a sandy beach. The memory tore me in half. Once, we were that happy, arms around each other, carefree. But that was before. I stepped forward, fists shoved in my pockets. What's the point of this trip down memory lane? Her lips quivered. I'm trying to remind myself of what we stand to lose. A bitter laugh escaped me. We? You mean what you threw away? She closed her eyes, tears clinging to her lashes. Yes, what I threw away. Anger simmered anew. I glanced at the photos, our history in living color, mocking me. I snapped, "Stop with the tears. They won't fix anything." She swallowed hard. I wish they could. For a moment, the truth of how broken we were pressed in on me. My chest felt weighted with regrets and seething betrayal. Then I noticed something new, a set of neatly folded legal documents on the nightstand. My pulse kicked up. "What's that?" I asked, jerking my chin at the papers. Elizabeth exhaled slowly. "Divorce forms. I thought maybe you'd want them." The possibility of divorce had loomed like a shadow since the night I'd found her in bed with Daniel, but seeing those forms physically shook me. I lifted them, scanning the official lines of text. My name, her name, dissolution of marriage. I set them down, my voice hollow. "You're giving up." She shook her head, tears slipping free. "No, I'm not giving up. But I realize you might be done. I wanted to be prepared, so we don't spend more time hurting each other." My jaw clenched. Part of me hated her for making me face this choice so quickly. Another part recognized the inevitability. "I'm not signing these tonight," I said roughly. She nodded, not pushing the point. The silence stretched, thick with sorrow. Finally, I turned to leave, heart battered by a wave of conflicting emotions. Rage, heartbreak, reluctant longing for the past. In the hallway, my phone buzzed. A single text from an unknown number. "Richard, it's Daniel. I need to talk." My stomach lurched. Without thinking, I marched outside, ignoring Elizabeth's questioning call. The cool air slapped my face. I dialed back, half expecting him to gloat or beg for forgiveness. He answered on the first ring. "Thank you for calling," he said, voice tight with apprehension. "I know I'm the last person you want to speak to, but I need you to hear me out." My temples pounded. "I warned you to stay away from her." "It's not about that," he said. "Look, I got laid off. They said I violated moral conduct by getting involved with a client's spouse. Word got around, and the higher-ups didn't like it." He paused, as if waiting for sympathy. A harsh laugh rumbled from me. "You want pity. Not my problem." He sighed. "I get that. But maybe you need to know. Elizabeth never meant for me to lose my job. She's upset too." "Great. You both can wallow in regret together." A savage edge crept into my tone. "If you think that changes what you did." He cut me off. "No, it doesn't. But losing my job made me realize how this entire thing has messed up more lives than I anticipated. I'm stepping away. For good. I hope that at least gives you some peace." His words landed in a hollow space inside me. My revenge, at least partially, had found him. Yet I felt no satisfaction. Just a dull ache. "You done?" I demanded. He cleared his throat. "Yeah, I'm done. I'm sorry." I ended the call without replying, the screen going black. A numbness spread through me. I wanted to see him suffer more, to pay for every second of agony I felt. And yet hearing the resignation in his voice made me question the shape of my own vengeance. That night, I didn't sleep. I prowled the living room, antsy with turbulent thoughts. I replayed every betrayal in my mind. Elizabeth's restlessness, Daniel's infiltration of our marriage, my own blind trust. The desire to hurt them festered. This wasn't just about the infidelity. It was about pride, heartbreak, and a thirst for retribution. By morning, I had a plan. It formed slowly, fueled by sleepless fury and lanced with chilling determination. Elizabeth was stirring in the kitchen, making tea. Her eyes flicked to me with apprehension, but I wore a mask of calm. "I want to fix us," she ventured, voice barely more than a whisper. I gazed at her, noting the fragile lines of worry around her mouth. "I'm sure you do," I said softly. She blinked, confusion flickering in her gaze. "Does that mean we can try?" I forced a small, gentle smile. "We'll see." My mind churned with hidden intentions. She seemed relieved, though a shadow of doubt lingered. She offered me a mug of tea. I took it, sipped, and let a wave of false warmth curve my lips. Inside, my heart pounded with frigid resolve. That day, I called out of work. I spent hours forging conversations with attorneys, researching property divisions, discovering ways to ruin Daniel's name further if he tried to keep contacting Elizabeth. And for her, my strategy was darker. I'd make her think I was willing to reconcile. I'd lull her into a sense of hope, then serve her with devastation when she least expected it. Emotional sabotage. Ruin her sense of stability like she'd annihilated mine. The more I fed that monstrous plan, the steadier I felt, like controlling the outcome gave me power over the chaos. That evening I cooked dinner for the first time in weeks. Roasted chicken and vegetables, one of Elizabeth's favorites. She watched me with hesitant wonder. "This is unexpected," she said softly. I shrugged, feigning casualness. "We need to share a meal. Try to talk." She offered a trembling smile. Halfway through dinner, she reached for my hand across the table. I let her lace her fingers with mine, ignoring the jolt of revulsion. My face remained neutral. The seeds of revenge took root deeper, hidden beneath calm acceptance. We talked about mundane things. How my colleague had asked about me, how the weather was cooling down. How Willow seemed less anxious. Elizabeth's eyes watered as she expressed regret, but I gave polite nods, carefully avoiding the raw center of the conversation. By the end of the meal, she looked almost hopeful. Later, in bed, our bed, she asked if she could lie next to me. I agreed, drawing her into a careful embrace. She curled against my chest, tears dampening my shirt. I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding. Her body felt both familiar and foreign. I inhaled the faint scent of her shampoo, fighting back a tumult of anger and heartbreak. She whispered, "Thank you for giving me a chance." I said nothing, letting the hush speak for me. Inside, I counted the steps until the moment I'd enact my final betrayal, watch her illusions crumble, and walk away. My heart was a twisted knot of bitterness, but I couldn't stop. Something had snapped in me that night I found her with Daniel, and now I craved an ending that would leave them both devastated. As the night deepened, I held her in my arms, my pulse thrumming with adrenaline. A single thought repeated, "I will never forgive you." 2 weeks later, the pieces on my mental chessboard were positioned exactly where I wanted them. Elizabeth believed we were on a cautious path to reconciliation. She stayed home more often, canceled after-work meetups, and showered me with small acts of devotion. I reciprocated just enough affection to stoke her hope. All the while, I meticulously prepared the final blow. My first target was Daniel. After hearing of his job loss, I discovered he'd started freelancing to make ends meet. Clients still admired his design work, so his name circulated among local business owners. Armed with half-truths and an anonymous email account, I contacted potential clients who'd posted reviews about him, sowing rumors that he was unprofessional, a liability, and that he had a known history of personal entanglements. The damage was subtle, but it spread, costing him opportunities. More than once, I heard through discreet sources that Daniel lost freelance gigs and struggled to pay rent. Good, that was only the beginning. Next came the legal side. I asked my lawyer to expedite the divorce papers, taking extra steps to secure an ironclad prenuptial advantage. Elizabeth's name wasn't on several assets, giving me an edge. I consolidated our shared accounts, then quietly separated our finances. She never noticed, too focused on our recovery. By the time I was ready, Daniel and Elizabeth were each staring at carefully orchestrated ruin, his financial meltdown, her looming heartbreak. The final night arrived like a stage set for tragedy. Elizabeth was upstairs, humming softly as she tidied our bedroom. I poured 2 glasses of wine, a rare vintage I'd been saving for a special occasion. My hand trembled with anticipation, but I forced calm. Setting the glasses on the table, I called out, "Liz, can you come down for a second?" She descended, hair softly framing her face, wearing a simple dress I'd always admired. She seemed hesitant, but her eyes carried a spark of cautious optimism. "What's this?" she asked, glancing at the wine. "I thought we could toast," I said, summoning a small smile. She approached, took her glass. "Toast to what?" I raised mine. "To closure. To the future." She blinked, confusion crossing her features. Then she lifted the glass to her lips. I did the same, fighting the urge to smirk. The wine's rich aroma filled my senses. After a sip, she set the glass down. "Richard, I just want to say thank you for giving us a shot. I know I betrayed you in the worst possible way, and I can't erase that. But I'm grateful you stayed." Her voice wobbled, sincerity shining in her gaze. I nodded, swallowing thickly. My chest squeezed, a pang of guilt. For a fleeting moment, I questioned the cruelty of my plan. Then I remembered the image of Daniel's body pressed against hers, the savage humiliation. I steeled myself. "I have something for you," I said quietly, reaching into my back pocket. I withdrew the divorce papers, along with an envelope stuffed with evidence of her affair. Screenshots of her text messages with Daniel, phone logs, even a photo I'd taken of them entering a motel. I slammed it all on the table. She stared, color draining from her cheeks. "Richard." "What?" "Sign them," I said, voice low and devoid of emotion. And read this if you want a reminder of why. I tapped the envelope. Her hands trembled as she picked up the papers, eyes flicking over the bold print. You can't be serious. I thought we were moving forward, trying to heal. A bitter laugh escaped me. Heal? You think I could ever forget how you gave yourself to him? My voice cracked with anger. No, I let you believe it was possible, but it's not. She took a shaky step back. Richard, please. I cut her off. Don't. We're done. For good. I've already made arrangements to leave. The house goes to me, thanks to the prenuptial details. You'll get a fraction of what you might expect, maybe less if you fight. Tears flooded her eyes. Why? You said. You made me believe. I made you believe what I needed you to. I snapped, cold fury twisting my words. Now you feel a fraction of the betrayal I felt. She slumped into a chair, cradling her head in her hands. Oh God. Richard, I'm so sorry. I stepped closer, dropping my voice to a deadly hush. Sorry doesn't wipe away what happened. This is your punishment, Liz. You tore my life apart. I'm returning the favor. She let out a shuddering sob, clutching the divorce papers, her eyes darting over the bullet points. The property settlement, the disclaimers, the finality spelled out in black ink. Her tears smudged the pages. I watched, an unexpected hollowness creeping into my chest. Revenge was mine, but it tasted metallic and empty. I forced my emotions aside, resolute in finishing the job. Sign them, or I'll make sure everyone hears my side. Your friends, your boss, everyone will know the details. She looked up, face streaked with tears. I never wanted to destroy us. I felt lonely, and I made a terrible mistake. Does that mean our entire history is worthless? A twisted ache flared in my heart. Apparently, it was worthless to you first. Her sob turned ragged. With trembling fingers, she scrawled her signature where indicated, tears splashing the paper. I stood over her, unblinking, as she finished. When she set the pen down, she stared at me, broken and lost. I snatched the papers, scanning her signature. The crackle of finality sent a bitter satisfaction coursing through me. That's done, I muttered, folding them. Elizabeth rose unsteadily, tears shining on her lashes. Where will you go? She asked, voice cracking. Somewhere else, I said flatly. Not here. She reached for me, but I yanked back, revulsion and heartbreak colliding in my stomach. Don't ever touch me again. Her lip quivered, but she nodded. Tears fell in silent confession of her grief. I strode toward the door, suitcase already packed in the trunk of my car. My final contingency. Before stepping outside, I turned back, meeting her gaze. If you ever contact me outside legal necessities, I won't hesitate to ruin what's left of your reputation. And Daniel's, if he tries to slither back. She opened her mouth, but no sound emerged, just quiet, anguished despair. I slammed the door behind me, stepping into the night. Cold air sliced across my face. My heart thundered in my chest, a swirl of triumph and devastation. Stowing the papers in the passenger seat, I settled behind the wheel. For a moment, I stared at the dark outline of the house, remembering countless happy moments, Christmas mornings, shared jokes in the kitchen, warm embraces on that very porch. That life was dead. I started the engine, hands trembling on the steering wheel. I had ended it, orchestrated their downfall, and taken my vengeance. But as I drove away, the hollow silence in my chest weighed heavier than any sense of victory. Wind rushed past the car windows, carrying away the last remnants of the man I used to be. With every mile, I felt something unravel, leaving me with a numb ache where love once lived. I had my retribution, yet it didn't fill the vacuum Elizabeth's betrayal created. No matter how meticulously I planned my revenge, I couldn't escape the inescapable truth. I was leaving behind the ashes of a life I had cherished, and so I pressed down the accelerator, forging into a future as uncertain as the night sky. If there was any consolation, it was that I would never again wake to that agonizing image of betrayal. But in extinguishing one pain, I carried another, an endless hollow echo that reminded me of what I'd lost and who I'd become. End.